So the first year anniversary is celebrated with paper. And I thought perhaps we could use this episode to celebrate our 1-year podcast anniversary in typical Keith and Laura style and talk about books that have changed our lives or impacted our lives because they're made of paper.
Yeah, I like it. Welcome back to In Residence. I'm Keith.
And I'm Laura.
Hey, Laura.
Hey, Keith.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm swell.
That's good.
How do you want to start?
Oh, goodness. Well, how about we kind of take turns and talk about the book and how it impacted us and maybe the author and the year, like about when it was published?
When it was published or when we found it?
Oh, how about when we found it?
Because that's kind of how I ended up lumping it together of like, oh, this is like youth, adolescence, adulthood, and then some books I discovered with the kids that I thought were kind of good mentions.
Oh, okay.
You know, that we've like read with the kids and stuff. So I kind of started segmenting it like that a little bit, but like,
okay.
Let's just go. Like what's the first one you want to talk about?
Okay, so the first book I want to talk about is the Harry Potter series. So I'm cheating a little bit already. It's the first one and I'm already cheating.
7
because
books.
I named a series instead of just a single book.
Yeah. I think at first you said top 5 and I'm like, oh, that's going to be tricky. So
yeah, I wrote a few more than 5.
I have a ton and I don't want to leave anything out, but I probably will on accident. So this is not a all-encompassing list here.
So I found these books after I graduated college. And the reason why it really impacted my life is because I never was a reader. I didn't enjoy reading. I really had a hard time reading quickly, as I've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Harry Potter books opened up this world to me that I, at best, maybe tolerated. Is that a way to...
Beforehand, you mean?
Yeah. Reading was a way to get information and learning, but not to have fun and enjoy yourself.
You didn't enjoy it.
I didn't.
Because it was difficult.
Correct.
So what was different about the Harry Potter books?
So I think what was different is they were magical. They were intriguing. They were written at a level that was just fun and easy to read. And so I thought going through them at the time I did, it was just great. It was always something to have on the plane with me when I traveled for my first job out of undergraduate school. I was on a plane every 3 to 4 days. So I think they just kept me company and opened up my world to reading can be fun and enjoyable. And I think without finding those at that time, I don't know if I'd do as much reading as I do now.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that you found something that invigorated like a passion for reading.
Yeah.
And because I met you after that. Or I mean, I met you before, but like when we started dating,
Correct.
You were a reader and I didn't know you to not be a reader.
Yeah.
And I actually was getting sick of reading because I was getting burned out.
Sure.
Because I was an English minor.
Okay.
I had 2 to 3 to 4 English classes at once. And so I was like in literature for adolescents and literature fantasy. And then I was in a writing workshop and I was getting burned out because I grew up reading for fun. And now I was learning all these literary criticism and historical criticism and all of these, like the analytical parts, which is kind of funny because I kind of yearn for that with music to understand it more. And I also do with like reading and writing, but it was just getting to be a little much. I mean, I discovered that you weren't a big reader when you're young. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you always have a book with you. And like, you're like thick books. And I'm like, I like kind of short reads.
Sure.
And anyway, that's interesting to remember because you always have a book going. So
yeah, I do. Or a couple.
Anything else about Harry Potter?
No, I think that's where it all began for me.
I never read them. I remember going and helping my friend Steve get his little brother the new release.
Oh, sure.
There were like lines, and like people waiting for like the new one to come out. And I was like, I don't know, I've never read these, but it's really cool that your little brother's into books,
Yeah.
So let's bring them.
I wonder if that was part of it too, that I was part of something. It was like,
Yeah. It was like in the culture.
right. And
it was like an experience.
I found them after several books had already been released. And so I got to start at the beginning.
Yeah.
But about halfway through, I did have to wait and be like, oh, the new one's coming. Get it on pre-order. See if you can find it. So I wonder if that was part of it too, that there's also kind of a collective experience maybe that society was having around the book at that time that also made it exciting.
So I don't know if I have a whole bunch of I don't know if I have like a top 5 list here. And so my head is going to when I was young. I'm going to just kind of list a few books that really stood out to me
Okay.
while I was thinking about this. So Richard Scarry, Cars, Trucks, and Things That Go.
Such a good book with the worm, with like the little inchworm.
Little glowworm and stuff or whatever. I always remember having that. I had like the one with like the purple cover. And then with that, the Boxcar Children.
Okay.
I read those. My mom read them to me, and then I started reading them myself. I wrote down the author because I couldn't remember. Gertrude Chandler Warner was the author. And I never paid attention to authors when I was young, so I had to look that up. But I remember the book. And I don't remember exactly, except for it was just about kids, and I enjoyed, and it made me want to read on my own. So things like that. And then that kind of goes into Dear Mr. Henshaw. That was by Beverly Cleary. And I remember reading that in elementary school and like checking it out from the library. And it was about a kid that had to write to his favorite author.
Okay.
Do you remember them making you do that in the library? They would try to get you to write to an author.
I don't know if I remember.
So I think they had us do that also. And then I had also like read a book about it. Like I didn't really remember what the story was about except for that. And that seemed so amazing to me that you could communicate with somebody that you'd never met. Yeah. And like, to me, that's like what books actually do. And same with like a letter, like, so he's writing letters to somebody that he's read their book and stuff. So it was really interesting. I'm like, oh, I'm like, that was a fun book. I don't remember exactly all it was about, but it was about a kid dealing with life and corresponding with like a mentor kind of thing, stuff like that pops up.
Yeah.
And then, Calvin and Hobbes. I got a couple of their collections when I was pretty young.
Okay.
And I didn't write any comics down on here.
Sure.
But I thought that would kind of count because it was young before I was like into like Marvel comics.
Sure. It
was something that got me into wanting to page through a book. And there was actually like some pretty interesting concepts in there. Like when you look at stuff, some comic strips when you're older, you're like, oh, that went over my head when I was a kid, I don't know if that one necessarily did, but it was always pretty funny. So that was kind of like youth, probably before adolescence. I always found stuff to read when I was young. I don't know. There's a lot. I got a lot more.
I'm giggling over here because I thought I was cheating by saying the Harry Potter series.
No.
And you like did like a youth bucket.
Yeah.
That's really cool you did that. I didn't think so much back to youth. These aren't on my list, but I loved Where the Sidewalk Ends.
Yeah.
And A Light in the Attic by Shel Silverstein. Those were some books I remember in my youth that I just really enjoyed, probably because they were short, they were funny, they resonated.
Like those were like poems and you could just open to any page.
Yeah.
Those were fun. Like I never had those growing up, but they were always at school. There was a group of us that would like kind of rush and hope we were first in line to get it. Same with like when you had like library when you were like in elementary school. All the Where's Waldo books would come off the shelf. Like every kid would like rush for those. And then you'd all be like crowded around looking at them together. Like, yeah, I'm thinking like second and third grade and stuff. Sure. So there's one more that is like kind of a transition for me from like youth to adolescent. And it was The Sword of Shannara by Terry Brooks.
Okay.
And that's a like 800-page one that I gave to child 2.
Oh, right.
And he read through it.
He finished it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I don't remember all of the plot and storyline or the characters even, but I remember reading that book a couple times between like 10 and 13 or something. And then there were more of them in a series, and I had gotten a couple of them as the years went on, but that was probably right at the end of like maybe 4th and 5th grade or something. So I don't know. That was fantasy. So that's like swords and like Lord of the Rings type stuff. I didn't know Lord of the Rings when I was a kid. I only heard about it when I was in high school and the movie started coming out or later. Well, I was probably out of high school and that. Steve liked Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
Okay.
But I'd never gotten into it. Anyway.
I feel bad I don't have much to contribute because I'm like, I didn't read them.
Yeah. No.
Not that I'm saying they probably aren't good. It's just in my childhood, I didn't really.
Well, I think what's interesting is that what got you into reading was a type of fantasy.
Yeah.
And same with me, actually. Like lots of chapter books, or a book with lots of chapters.
Yeah.
So anyway. What else do you have?
Okay, so just thinking about, since you're clumping them, maybe I can put a couple together.
Sure.
And they're not exactly alike, but they're things that I read in high school and or college that piqued my interest and made me think differently about the world. And so the first is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And then the second is Silent Spring by Rachel Carlson.
What's that one?
Silent Spring?
Yeah.
Silent Spring is about the environment and the impact that people have on the environment. Yeah. And
this
so
is telling of where you went in later in your educational career and
environmental justice.
Yeah.
And so both those books for different reasons really made me think about how people can impact societies and environments in ways that can be good and then also not so good. Like I said, they don't exactly fit in a bucket, but those were two that really had me questioning and thinking differently about the world around me. What about you?
So I've got one in that same line of thinking. Illusions by Richard Bach. So I found out about him as an author from my hockey coach. He printed off the first few pages of this book and like photocopied it and shared it with me. And it's handwritten in the book. And so I was really interested. It's like on legal pad or something. Okay. And it's like a short little story that kind of informs the rest of the story. But it's, to summarize it, it's the takeaway from that those first few pages is kind of letting go of the status quo and taking a chance and it going wrong and then getting up, brushing yourself off and letting go again and failing and getting smashed against the rocks in the current and getting up and trying again. And then all of a sudden you just kind of float away and you're fine. And it was like just one of those moments where it was like, whoa, like my world kind of shifted and I was being challenged to think differently and with see other perspectives. And so I was probably like in like an early teenager, and so it was very impactful. And I went on to like find a bunch of his other books. That's kind of how I go. If I find something, an author that resonates with me, I kind of do like a deep dive, right? And so that's like, series are great, but also like when an author releases a bunch of different books, it's kind of fun to inspect those and figure them out. But so yeah, that was a big shift for me. And I don't know if I really got the joke fully. It just felt like it was turning on a light, but I still quite couldn't like focus my eyes to see what was being illuminated for me. And so that was kind of the start of that journey of me always looking, or I think maybe it fed into my learner and wanting to understand more so that I could communicate better or maybe find some answers to help me keep moving forward. Like I didn't have that type of language, but now looking back, I'm like, ooh, no wonder that kind of drew me in. It was just it's a good book.
Yeah, I know you've talked about that book before, and just how impactful that was on you. I should probably read it.
Yeah. Well, and the next one I got was, and I don't know if my coach gave me this book. I feel like he might have given me a copy or told me about it, but it's called Running from Safety. And so now looking back, it was about him having a conversation with his younger self. It was like a weird little time where it's all a little metaphysical and a little like self-helpy kind of in a way. You know what I mean? Like how it's kind of analytical, but like also a little magical and like parallel universe-y kind of feeling stuff, but like possibility. And so the stuff that we've been talking about, like transition and leaning into uncomfortable growth. And then I go and think back, like I was reading a book called Running from Safety. Well, like that's what we're doing. Like that's how you grow, is getting out of your comfort zone. And, you know, not putting yourself into danger, but realizing that you can get outside of your comfort zone, and like the feeling a little less safe is probably like a signal that, oh, something great could happen here.
Right.
Like the risk versus reward, you know, especially when there's no real risk, it's in our head, which feels real, but if we can navigate that. So those books, I think, laid a foundation to help me get out of the flow of probably like, you know, how school is like, you show up, you wait, you go where you're told to go, you stand in line. So this is starting to come into my life of like, I can think like, yeah, I'm not going to be disruptive to this system because I'm not going to change the school system as a kid, but I can start thinking about how I'm going to change the way I think and the way I'm going to go and operate in the world. And so I think this is where that started to happen for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, let's keep going. What else you got?
Okay. The next book I want to talk about is Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. And this is by Carrie Patterson. I found this book at a time in my career when I wanted to work towards leveling up and having a greater impact. And one of the biggest pieces for me that I needed to figure out is how to say the hard things sometimes when it's necessary and in a way that is intentional and clear. I had a lot of trouble with that, where I would opt for silence instead of actually adding my opinion, especially if it was against or different than what others were saying, because I thought that would rock the boat and that wouldn't be great. But being able to have hard conversations and be prepared for those is really, really important. So that helped me have the words and a little bit more confidence in speaking up or having hard conversations that are uncomfortable at work. I have used so much of what I learned and have now practiced a lot from that book in my career. And so I found this probably in the early 2000s, you know, right around probably when I was in graduate school for my doctorate, around there. So really good book. It really helped me evolve how I approached hard things.
Yeah. And like out of that, we see things like radical candor.
Yeah, that was on my list too, but I picked Crucial Conversations was where it started.
Kind candor, I think, is
Kind candor's a Gary Vee thing.
Gary Vee thing.
Yep.
It's kind to be able to speak up with generosity, right? Like, not saying the hard thing to be blunt and to shake people. It's more of like, I'm doing a disservice if I don't. So what that's making me think of is, I'm going to start now, but he's going to keep coming up, Seth Godin. I found Poke the Box from a recommendation from a friend. It's one of his that I hadn't gotten to yet. And a friend's like, you should read this one. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then you and I both read it. And that was one of the biggest things, besides like planting seeds and seeing what grows and going for it. And that point when he's like, if you hold back and you don't share what's on your mind or what you're thinking or what you have to give to the world, it's stealing. And I think that's aligned with, if you sit quietly and don't share, like when you're in a meeting, just because you feel like you're going to ruffle some feathers, you're stealing. Because that's why, that's the whole point of having a team, is to be able to have diverse opinions and diverse thinking so that you can get to a better decision.
Yeah. And that does. I mean, the more voices that are used together to build something, the stronger that project, that opinion, that decision often is going to be. And so I agree with you on that. Yeah, Poke the Box. That's also a really good book.
Yeah.
Is that one on your list?
Yeah, every one of Seth's books is on my list. So,
do you want to do like a little shout out to Seth Godin?
Yeah. So,
like with this like bucket you're going to talk about?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll dive into that one. So Seth, Poke the Box, The Practice, The Song of Significance, The Dip, Purple Cow, Linchpin, and the one that is actually like where I was like, if I had to pick one for people to start with, it's The Icarus Deception. I think I listened to that at least 3 or 4 times over a couple years while I was in the cabinet shop. That and Linchpin, because they were always available from the library.
Sure.
So I could download them, and I was listening to them. So there's a part, I'm gonna read the very beginning of it real quick.
Okay.
I think you'll see why it resonated with me from the get-go. So it begins with, how long are you going to wait? They told you to get your resume in order, to punch your ticket, to fit in, and to follow instructions. They told you to swallow your pride, not to follow your dreams. They promised trinkets and prizes and possibly riches if you would just suck it up and be part of the system, if you would merely do what you were told and conform. They sold you debt and self-storage and reality TV shows. They sold your daughters and sons too, all in exchange for what would happen later when it was your turn. It's your turn. That started getting pumped into my ears when I was in a place where I didn't want to be, but I had to be.
Sure.
And I really needed to hear something like that, like, it's your turn, start making things happen. And I can do that while I'm doing what I have to do. But what am I going to do after hours, you know? And so that was probably around 2013 or 2014. And I somehow discovered Seth, probably through podcasts and stuff like I've mentioned before. But the overarching story in this book is the Icarus fable. I'll share it, right, real quick.
Yeah.
So Icarus and his father Daedalus are, I think, imprisoned for, you know, I'll just do the bullet points here. And so Daedalus invents wings so that they can fly to their freedom, right? And we all hear that he warned his son, you know, don't fly too high to the sun because it'll melt your wings and you'll fall into the ocean and you'll perish. Well, the deception of that is that the other half of that was Icarus's father also said, and don't fly too low, you won't have enough lift to keep going. And that is pivotal to see that revelation that I was raised to not set my sights so high so that I wouldn't fail. And I was tricked into believing that if I set my sights low enough, I'll be fine. But that's no way to live.
Right.
And that's a way to perish as well, is just flying too low. And so that's the biggest takeaway for me from the book. And like, that's kind of the punchline right away. He just hits you with, which is like, hey, you don't need to go all the way up here and burn out, but you surely don't have to be so low that you drowned.
Right.
You know, in what I think of as like depression and sadness and never having enough ambition, you know.
Yeah.
And so that, like,
not
that's
being fulfilled.
Yeah. And so this is a huge book for me. And every single thing I read from Seth has a gem like that in it. And they dovetail each other. I mean, he's got another book called What to Do When It's Your Turn.
Sure.
And I mean, that's up there too. So, anyway, changed my life. You know, it's just gives me, the little nudges I need to realize that I can do hard things. I can choose. I can decide. I have agency. I simply have to choose. So I get all excited about it. That's definitely a top 5 book for me. I mean, my top 22 would probably be Seth Godin. What else? What do you got?
The next one on my list is How Women Rise by Sally Helgeson and Marshall Goldsmith. This book came to me, or I found this book, when I was a newer executive leader. I was really starting to understand more about what impact my gender had on not just my leadership style. I understood some of that, but how others interacted with me and perceived me. The book just really helped me understand how I could show up and be genuine with who I was as a woman leader. It just really helped check me and challenge myself, and also help me feel seen, I think, as well in that space. So that was one book that, like I said, it helped support me and name that gender dynamic in executive spaces and was really helpful. How about you?
I think I have another bundle.
A bundle?
And feel free to let me know if anything stands out or if it makes you think of something, go for it. But and some of these are so from you. This might be, I don't know if this is one of yours or not, but how I mentioned you always had a book, and you would find like some series, and you'd be going through the trilogy of these books and stuff. The Hunger Games.
Yeah, those are good.
Is it Suzanne Collins? Yeah. I think.
Yep.
You started reading those, and that kind of got me back into reading. Okay. Like I hadn't read. I was reading more like guitar stuff for building and woodworking type stuff for a while. Magazines. I kind of got away from reading novels and even nonfiction. But The Hunger Games was like a good, fast read that kept me wanting to read more. And then in that same vein, Andy Weir, like we talked about Project Hail Mary.
Sure.
But The Martian, when I found that, I read that book. That was like the first book I had read in a while too. When that came out, Ernest Cline, Ready Player One, listening to those. And then I just listened to Armada. Okay. One of his other books was really good. And then A Gentleman in Moscow. That's a little more recent, but I read that a few years ago, and that was really powerful. And I was like, oh, this is a book. Like, this is a novel. This is what I wish I could do, something like this, which is great, because when something makes you go, oh, I want to do that. Oh, I wish I could do something like that. That's inspiring to me. And so these are more novels, and I think there's another section of another genre that maybe I'll bring up next, but a bunch of books like that are just, wow, these are really, really great stories and well written and just pull you in. So, little things like that I've enjoyed over the last several years.
Yeah. I can't remember who wrote it, but there's an author that writes novels from the perspective of the villain in traditional stories.
Oh, like Wicked?
So Wicked, yeah, Wicked's the kind of the famous one, but there's ones with the Ugly Stepsisters from Cinderella. There's different versions of it, and those are really good. That spirit and that energy you're talking about, where they're just fun and you want to keep reading, and those books, I didn't even think of those until now, but those are really good.
Well, I'd never read Wicked, but we went and saw that on our honeymoon?
Yes.
Right?
Yep. We did. Yep.
We saw it on Broadway in New York.
We did.
I was blown away. That was fun. Yeah, they just kind of turn it on its head a little bit. It's shifting perspective. It's really interesting when someone can do that. It's a good exercise, for our brains, I think, to try to look at something a different way, playful.
Absolutely. So, just so if anybody wants to try and look into those books, the author is Gregory Maguire.
Yeah. What else do you got?
For me? Okay, let's see. I'm checking the map off as we go. So this might be a bundle, but I'm only going to name one of them. But anything by Brené Brown.
Yeah.
The one that I enjoy probably the most, and if I was to think which of these books really impacted my life and helped me, I would say it's Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. Again, I found this book when I was a leader and I was going through difficult leadership situations. It really helped me find who I was and to lean in to be okay with who I was and how I show up as a leader, as a human. And knowing that vulnerability isn't a weakness, but really it can be a strength of yours. And it's actually brave to be who you are and lean into that and show people that.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're actually strong.
Right.
And not to say you need to be vulnerable in front of people you don't feel safe with. But.
Correct. But even just the idea of, we often do put up that brick wall or put on armor before we go into situations that aren't really who we are, and understanding that that's normal as well, and how to unpack that. Again, it was a game changer for me in how I show up, again, as a leader and as a human. So anything by Brené Brown, I saw her on the movie Wine Country and I geeked out.
Yeah, that was
It was
so
like
funny.
a 2-minute
little cameo.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, Brené Brown's in this. I was so excited. Her TED Talk too. I know we're doing books today, but her original TED Talk, I've watched that so many times. It's just a nice reboot or an infusion, right, of confidence and comfortable ease with yourself.
Yeah. In that same genre, it makes me think of Simon Sinek, Start with Why, or Find Your Why.
Leaders Eat Last.
Leaders Eat Last.
Another one.
Infinite Game, that one. I really love his work. Greg McKeown, Essentialism and Effortless. Michael Bungay Stanier, How to Begin. Same friend that told me about Poke the Box and that I should read that one. She told me about How to Begin by having like a little book club with it.
Yeah.
And then I think I have The Coaching Habit by him and probably another one. Can't think of it, but his books are great too. But I feel like there's a bunch of authors in that genre, that personal growth and development, that are really powerful. And like Seth Godin he started with marketing and all this stuff, but I really look to him in that same genre as well, of like, it's helping me grow and move forward and figure out myself just as much as the world around me in a way. So I think that genre is really powerful.
One I would add to that was maybe one of my honorable mentions was Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah.
Kind of in that same vein of kind of that development and growth and...
Or John Acuff,
Yeah, John Acuff.
Yeah.
Another great one.
Again, like, I'm going to forget people, but there's more, I bet, that really stand out and that I've enjoyed. People can let us know if they're like, well, what about so and so? I'm like, yeah,
them too.
or oh, who's that? Tell us more.
Yeah.
So I kind of hopped in and listed a bunch there. So do you have more?
So I have one more book on my list.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last book on my list, The Body is Not an Apology: The Power of Radical Self-Love by Sonia Renee Taylor. I wanted to put this on the list because growing up and now, the influence of society and other people on the way that your body is, and that it is something to be fixed, is really unhelpful sometimes. And so the book is really talking about how you do deserve to take up space. You deserve to take care of your body at any size, with anything that you might not love right now or people might point out as wrong. And so I think that's just a really powerful book that I discovered maybe about 3 years ago. I read it at least once a year. It's just a really good reminder of you are enough. Your body does a lot of great, powerful things for you. Be kind to it, love it, support it, and you do you.
Yeah, that's great.
So, yeah.
Okay, so I'll pivot to children's books. No, so like another thing that kind of popped up because I was segmenting by like year and stuff.
Sure.
Rediscovering books after college, and then rediscovering books again with the kids, like The Wild Robot. Right? We did like a book club with them.
We did do a book club.
The Percy Jackson books.
Did a book club with that too.
Yeah. The Bad Guys. Like these like scholastic type books that they would get, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing them like just devour the bad guys and Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Like they wanted those box sets for birthdays and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Right? Even going back to like Sandra Boynton, like the like
The
books that like they would
books.
Yeah, they would like chew them because they were just babies, but getting to read those with them. And so just discovering books with them and seeing them grow and like what they've gotten into now, like Child 2 read all the Hunger Games.
You did?
You know, he's reading like the prequel now or already finished it, I don't know. And so it's just, it was fun. So I don't know if any pop into your mind, because I know I can't think of them all, but like Harry Potter you read with Child 1, I think.
I did.
Right?
Yep. One that sticks in my head, I love Dragons Who Love Tacos.
Oh.
It's a really good book. The pigeon books with the bus. What was that called?
Like Pigeon or something. I don't know. It was like, I can't remember.
Yeah.
He makes a cameo in the book Happy Pig Day.
Okay.
That I saw with a little friend. It's her favorite book, and she had me read it to her the other day. And then all of a sudden in the back, the little pigeons there, and instead of Happy Pig Day, he made it Pigs Say Pigeons. And he's like popped up. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the little pigeon guy. I'm like, I remember that.
Like, that's so cute.
She didn't know what I was talking about, but I had to explain that's pigeon.
When we had Child 1, I had a baby shower, as people kind of have sometimes. And one person gave us a whole bag of kind of their family's greatest hits for books. And it was fantastic. So, I mean, there might have been, 6 to 8 books in there. And I remember that standing out, be like, wow, that was really amazing. And I just recently had a family member who had a baby. They requested, instead of cards, a book. Instead of giving us a card, give us one of your favorite children's books. I always like buying books for kiddos. Well, and myself, but in particular, kiddos.
I agree. Anything else?
I don't think so. I have a couple non-traditional recommendations.
Okay. What's that mean?
Should I go in that direction? Recommendations? Are we ready to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to recommend 2 things. The first is journaling. One of the books that I put on my list was a blank journal, but it didn't quite fit with our conversation, but I think that there's so much power, and I've discovered so much about myself and worked through a lot of things by getting them on paper. And so a blank journal is one of my recommendations.
Taking notes while I read is one of the most powerful things I can do. I don't love writing in my books. There's just something about it, or like you bend pages sometimes to bookmark, and it makes me cringe. There's just there's something that's ingrained in me of like, treat everything precious and don't break it, that it's hard for me to do.
You don't like when I dog ear my books.
Yeah. But I can also see that it also shows that it's been loved. Like, so I'm trying to be okay with it, but I like to grab to what you're saying, like a notebook or something, and take notes. It's helped me retain and think more about what is standing out to me. So
yeah,
that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
What else?
Do you want to hear my second one?
Yeah.
My second one is to check out your public library.
Yeah.
I know that we're talking about books, but books can be really expensive. I know that's something you mentioned in one of your comments of you were able to get Seth's book through the local library, and whether it's a physical copy, a book on CD, or a digital or audio digital, they're a great resource to get free books.
Libby app.
Yeah, the Libby app is fantastic.
Yeah, because some of the books can be delivered in the app or to your Kindle.
Yeah.
Or your Kindle app. So you can read it on your computer or
Phone
iPad or your device or
Yeah.
whatever. So I love being able to get the audiobooks from the library.
Yeah. Although we're really excited about reading, it doesn't have to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
So those are my 2 recommendations. Do you have any recommendations?
I don't know if I do. I'm kind of tapped out because I feel like I just recommended like 30 books. I'll have a recommendation next time.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get out of here.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. Good night, Moon.
Oh, that's a good one too.